Greetings everyone, I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, it's time for another movie review, and it is once again an entry in the Universal Mummy series. I've already done a video essay style review of the classic original with Boris Karloff, and I've done two off the cuff in front of the camera reviews of the first two films in the Kharis series, Hand and Tomb. Now it's time for the third entry in that series, The Mummy's Ghost. Here's my Universal Mummy collection. Just before I get too far into it, just a friendly reminder that if you want to support the channel, both the Patreon and PayPal links are down below. If you want to continuously support the channel and gain access to videos like this early, go the Patreon route. If you want to just do a one-off support or a one-off request, you can always go the PayPal route. Either way, your support is appreciated. Mummy's Ghost, third film, released once again 2 years after the previous one. And I could definitely say that with this one, you could definitely tell the series is starting to lose some steam a little bit. Like I mentioned when I reviewed the previous two ones, you could see that these are like proto-slasher films. They're not quite slashers, but if you're familiar with slasher films, you see a lot of the tropes there. You know, nameless, slow killer, body count, and of course some of the tropes like running away, trip. No matter how fast you run or how far you run, the slow killer always finds you. Stuff like that. You see in a lot of slasher movies, both good ones, medium ones, and ones. Now with this one, you can start to see another trope from the series that have sequel after sequel, and that is each one becomes more uninspired and is just another cash grab. Or as Vince McMahon would say, it's all about the money. Not to say there isn't anything good about the film, it's just this is one of those ones that, you know, after you watch it once, unless you're like a big Universal Monster fan or watching all of them in a row, doing a big old mummy marathon, you're probably not going to want to watch it again. Honestly, I can see myself watching it again. I mean, I had some fun with it. I mean, I'm a long-time Universal Monster fan, so I get enjoyment out of it. It's one of those things that when I'm watching some of these lesser quality ones that are in the B grade, and even if you want to go down further, I know what I'm signing up for when I watch them. Now the plot takes place the same year as the previous film, so it's after Kharis' previous demise in the previous film. The job of guarding him and retrieving Ananka's body now falls to a new priest, played by John Carradine. This is Yosef Bey. He's once again handed off the job by Zuko in aging makeup. Just the thing to mention is that this whole prologue with them in Egypt was a last-minute addition to the script. And you can thank the director, Reginald Le Borg, who had a very prolific career. I mean, it's too many things to name there, and unless you're a hardcore cinephile, probably more so than I am, or a big Western fan, a lot of these names would not probably ring a bell, so I didn't even type them down. He just has a prolific career. This is like towards the beginning, middle of his career. And if how he handled the camera work and the actors and anything, then I'll probably want to look into some of his Westerns, but we thank him for this. And the reason he wanted this prologue added was to give Kharis' introduction a little bit more basis and logic, because in the original script, the first time we see him lumbering, that's the first time we see Kharis. No other indication of how he's there. So it would have been like some of those sequels where it's not a 100% note for note direct sequel. It takes place after the previous film, but there's like loose continuity with what happened. The best slasher example I can give is the ending is when you go from Jason Takes Manhattan to Jason Goes to Hell. Last time we saw Jason in Jason Takes Manhattan, he's killed by the toxic waste, which somehow goes through the Manhattan sewer system every night at midnight. Just a weird little thing to throw in there about New York. I never get tired of mentioning that. And then the next time we see him, he's back to normal. A little grotesque. A little bit more than normal because of the toxic waste. And he's back in Crystal Lake. No explanation for how he got back. Just, you know, yeah, they'll accept it. They'll probably think, hey, he came back and he went back home. So it would have been like that. Now, adding in the whole thing of them talking about Tana leaves and how he'll come anywhere for him adds a little bit more basis. And then when you combine it with the surviving character from the previous film, Professor Norman, played again by Frank Reicher, who, of course, played Captain Englehorn in King Kong and its sequel, Son of Kong, which I haven't seen yet. You put him in there as well. Dude's antenna leaves, and you got a semi-logical reason for why Kharis survived. But it's that one slasher thing that no matter what you do to the character, he's going to be able to come back in. It's like, no matter what, especially once you get a satisfying way, they'll come up with some contrived way to make sure he survived. Oh, the main heroine cut off his head. I will just say switch places with the guy in the next film, they'll buy it. That was a stupid idea. Now, Kharis kills Riker, and he reunites with Yosef Bey, and their main goal throughout the film is to get to Ananka's body and recover it. Now, the scenes with the human characters in between this moment are lumbering, so that's another trope we get there that you could throw into the slasher vibe, where the only reason to root for the main characters is that they're the main characters, but that's not just a slasher issue. Last time I watched Disney Snow White, that was my main problem with Aurora and Philippe, but another topic there. Here, I mean, the characters are acted decent enough for the material. I mean, we got Robert Lowry playing Tom, the romantic lead, who would later on go on to play Batman in the 49 Batman and Robin. So he had a little bit of a career. And then Amina, played by Ramasai Amez, if I spelled her name correctly. They have some decent chemistry together. Just some of their scenes are a little lumbering until some of the more mystical elements come in, and they're interspliced with Kharis and Yosef Bey doing their work. When they get to the mummy, that's when we get a good scene where the moment Kharis touches the mummy of Ananka, disintegrates. Now the thing about it is we do not see the disintegration, which is like, really? We don't get to see disintegration? We just get a quick cut back to the main female who, just so you know, it turns out to be Ananka's reincarnation, which ties into the plot here. And back, and the mummy's disintegrated, and then Kharis flips his lid. And in these movies, other than like glorified stunt work, Chaney doesn't really get a lot to do. So he's kind of wasted under those bandages. So it's one of those sad things. Especially since we all know he apparently did get drunk on the set of the films, which just shows how much of a miserable time he must have had in that makeup. But here, where he starts flipping his lid, you really did get to see a little bit of his energy there. And he probably channeled all the experience he was having on this film and the previous film into that scene. A little too much, because if you watch carefully, apparently when he breaks part of the glass in one scene, I guess they didn't switch it out for the safety glass, or he hit it too hard and some flew up and cut his chin through the makeup. So in another scene not that far afterwards, when you see blood on his chin, apparently that is his actual blood. I've seen that, it's like, ooh, I'm surprised the censors didn't object to that, but I guess they didn't catch it, or when they found out it was a mistake and they couldn't afford to reshoot it, they're like, yeah, right, we'll give it a pass. Yeah, of course. Now, they do eventually find out who Ananka's reincarnation is. Kharis kidnaps her, takes her back to Yosef, and of course we get the same old thing we've seen before, where the priest falls in love with the girl, tries to take her for his own, like always in the last couple minutes of the movie. Kharis flips his crap, turns on him, and it's this last part of the movie that this is one of the reasons I would say I'd watch it again, and it's one of the highlights of the film, in between the lovey-dovey stuff that do add some more to the horror movie tropes, and that is we have a downbeat ending. Now, I'd say downbeat endings, it depends on the film. Sometimes the downbeat ending works, sometimes it doesn't. This one, and this is even with the context of the next film in the series, what it does, because I already know some of the general plot. That aside, even with that, this ending does work. And if they had not made that film, this would have been a pretty decent indie for a Kharis trilogy. And that is the girl dies. It's one of the few times in this part of horror movie history where the main heroine is not going to survive. There is no final girl syndrome here. She's not going to be rescued by the men with guns like Inspector Walgreen, played by Barton McLean, who was also in the Maltese Falcon. Nope, none of that here. She dies. I mean, she slowly starts changing into a more mummified appearance, which is weird. I guess it's Kharis' touch and the whole mystical, magical connections making her age back into a mummy or something. It's weird. It just adds to the weird thing. It's not explained properly, but Her and Kharis go into the swamp that's nearby, and they sink into the water, and they die together. So it is one of those endings where the monster's destroyed, but the girl dies with him. Bittersweet, I guess you could call it, but it's more bitter than sweet. It's just that thing that salvages it. One thing I would love to have seen is how audiences back in the day reacted to this. I wonder if a lot of them were going, "This is effing BS." I can imagine if Twitter and stuff like that were around back there, you would have had a lot of horror movie fans going, "OMG, this ending sucks. Universal has made an enemy for life. YOLO." Or other stuff to that effect. I could just imagine, or maybe they took it for what it was. And we're like, "Ooh, maybe they'll solve it in the next one," because they figured that they were going to make another one, or maybe not. But it's just that moment does redeem some of the meh parts of the plot. And it's definitely one that is earned to a point. I mean, you might disagree with me on that, but it definitely makes that last part a little bit more lively, because other than that, it's like, we've seen this. Good for enjoyment, especially if you want to get your mummy quota and then click off cliches or things that would eventually develop into cliches for horror films later on. Now, going back to Lon Chaney, as I mentioned before, his whole alcohol issue, which did eventually contribute to his passing. There have been some rumors involved in here that because of his condition, I guess Chaney was not in all the scenes with the mummy, like some of the far scenes, some of the other ones. But Le Borg disputed that and claimed no doubles were used and Chaney did all of his scenes. And to go in with that, he did admit that Chaney did go a little overboard in one scene. And in a 1989 interview, he mentioned that when they were filming the scene where Chaney, as Kharis, kills the Norton character, he was strangling Reicher a little bit too vigorously. Now, thankfully, due to the positioning with the camera, Chaney's blocking out Reicher's reactions in that shot, so we can't see his very real shocked appearance. And as Reicher would say, he nearly killed me. Now, Reicher was professional, and he never filed a formal complaint, even though nowadays someone probably would. In social media, they'd be taking people to task. I mean, if they took a certain Joker actor to task for sending one of his coworkers a dead rat in a box, they would have taken Chaney to task for this. But the next day on set, he had noticeable marks on his neck. That's definitely Chaney's alcoholism drawing near. IMDb did not mention his alcoholism when they mentioned that fact, but when you know about the problem Chaney had with the bottle, there was a factor in there somewhere. What the factor is, probably is lost a little control in there, probably was a little sloshed. Which, of course, when you think about that and you watch some of the scenes where Chaney has to break through the fence, and then, of course, later on when he bursts his crap in the museum, you just have to feel a little sorry for him. The acting, for the most part, is what you would expect in this type of film, especially at this point in the second wave of Universal's horror cycle, where they're churning these films out just to make money. Lon Chaney does what he can, but he's mainly like a glorified stunt character. John Carradine is pretty decent as Joseph Bay. Definitely believable. Zuko, for the brief moment he's there, he's decent. Lowry, he's alright for the romantic lead. Reicher, decent for the few scenes he's in. The rest of the cast, that's what you would expect from one of these type of films. Like I said, you know what you're getting in for when you watch it. You're not watching this for acting. This can be like, at least this far into the cycle. Earlier on, yeah. But there's a difference between Bela Lugosi as Dracula and all the ones in the Wales films and this. Different levels of Universal's horror cycle. And also different levels. Level 1, Level 2. But like I said earlier, it is worth at least one watch, especially if you are a Universal horror fan. If you're a horror fan in general, just for the historical value, it's worth a watch, especially if you're making your way through each of them. Now, this is probably one that, unless you are a big fan of these films, you're probably going to be a one-and-done watch. But even with that, I would recommend getting DVD just for the features alone, as it does add a little bit of context to some of these scenes and to the history of these films. And now we just got one more of the main ones, and that's going to be the fourth and final installment. And that'll be the next video popping up here. That will be The Mummy's Curse. The devil's on the loose and he's dancing with the mummy. Till next time, guys.